Welcome to Sekou Style. This is your man Sekou Casley. Today we're going to be talking about France, the vampire, the parasite that has and continue to be sucking the blood, the money, and the natural resources of the African continent. To this channel, you already know what to do. Like, follow, subscribe. That's what I ask from you. So, France has pretty much 85% of the national reserve of 14 African countries. 85% save. And France decide how these countries uses their natural resources. Now, bear in mind, some of these countries have managed to renegotiate the contract in a little bit more favorable terms with the French government, but still, French still have a chokehold over some of these countries that they cannot breathe, pretty much. It's really stepping on their needs, they cannot breathe, right? So we're looking at 14 African countries that are obliged to put 50% of their foreign exchange reserve at the Bank of France. 50%. That 14 country is obliged to put 50% of their foreign national reserve in the French bank. Can you imagine that? So pretty much you're just pimping these 14 African countries, right? But how do we get there? Like, why? Why? I guess that's the question. Like, but these are independent countries, right? They are sovereign countries. Sovereignty, meaning they are independent. They shouldn't be going to another country to go. Why, right? That's how I'm going to point out some of the historical stuff that why we are where we are today, and why these coups are happening, and many Africans in the Francophone world are happy that finally these coup leaders are listening to their people and they're doing the right thing. Although everybody wants democracy, representation, at least the notion of democracy, the equal representation, by the people and for the people, but they are preferring coup because they know what democracy has done to them, because democracy has been manipulated by France in many of these instances. So let's get into it, right? So I'm gonna go through 8 points to make my point here. It might be a little bit of a long video, but please bear with me. Let's get into it. Point number 1, right? We look at the fallout from independence, the inception of French dominance. So the story of Guinea comes, Guinea-Conakry, the story of Sekou Touré. Sekou Touré pretty much was the first African leader to challenge the French and told them, no. We want independent. When we say independent, we want independent from France. We don't want to be putting our money into your coffers. We want independent. We want to create our own money. Guinea franc, not the money from Guinea backed by the French. We don't want the French authority in our territory. We want self-governance. We prefer self-governance in poverty than, relying on you guys to support us. So there was a referendum in Guinea in October of 1952. This is October. Yes, October 2nd, 1952, if I'm not mistaken. And the French lost. The people of Guinea, led by Ahmed Sekou Touré, won. They are independent from France. Through that independence, the referendum was like, we want complete freedom from France. They didn't want anything to do with France. France got really pissed, right? The fallout, that's where the fallout from Guinea independence started. France got really pissed. So to instill fear in other African nations that may think about that same thing that Sekou Touré did, you know what the French did? They burned the medicine. They destroyed everything that the French, why, the colonial masters, while they were colonizing these people, the Guinean, while they were colonizing the Guinean, they destroyed everything, the road, they burned medications, everything that they had, factory, destroy everything, the secret that they knew, burned things and left. But not even that, when they left, they started undermining the Sekou Touré government. started propagating negative things about Ahmed Sekou Touré and the Guinean people. He started sabotaging everything that the man stood for his country, to set an example throughout the region, the Francophone country, to say, if you do dare ask for a full independence, this is what's gonna happen to you. Like we have done to Sekou Touré, you will be no exception. We will deal with you and you will end up losing your independence. You and your people will suffer. It won't be the French. So Sekou Touré was the case number one, right? That was the first point. Now you see, now people are afraid. What happened? Right? The message has gone through now. The French, like the consequences, like if they do manage to challenge the French dominance in Africa, this is what's gonna happen. So some leaders started falling for it. This is gonna come to my second point. Olympio, he, after looking at of Togo, after looking at what happened in Guinea, he wanted independence, but he's like, no, we, let me choose a different path from the Guineans. We're gonna give in to whatever the French want. And, hopefully then we'll be able to get, a good result. So he chose a different path. Pretty much the French started saying, okay, they agreed to pay an annual debt to France in exchange for, independence. So instead of French giving you full independence, you're gonna pay for the independence. And that payment was because the French constructed things, they do their things. So pretty much you are not free until you finish paying their debt for all their investment that they have put into your country. So Olympus, Olympio, I'm sorry for the name, decided to he decided to pay for the price of freedom, pretty much. Freedom, but we will pay. So he and Togo, the Togolese people then, under his leadership in 1963, decided, okay, this is what we're gonna do and this is how we're gonna go. But, the colonial debt, was about 40% of the Togolese budget, 40%. And it became, so it's like we're giving you independence, but we're gonna take 40% of your budget to pay us the debt that you owe us. So pretty much it's not independent. So now Togo started struggling because obviously it's not sustainable. The money was too much. And the Togolese leader wants to renegotiate that, but it didn't happen. French was like, no, it's not gonna go that way. And guess what happened? Coup d'etat started happening now, because if you're a leader that agreed to pay the French, now you see it's not really good for your country. You wanna come back to renegotiate or decrease or say, I cannot afford it. The French will come with coup. So number 3, you start seeing the coup epidemic. You start seeing the coup epidemic in the region, in Africa, especially the Francophone countries, right? Tragically, those who dare to challenge the system face their consequences, which is the leaders who, like Thomas Sankara, and all the other, Modiba Keita of Mali, Olympios of Togo, and other leaders who tried to break free from the Colonial Pact because they became victim of coup orchestrated by these colonial masters, especially France. So it's like a double-edged sword, right? You agree to say, okay, we're gonna pay something so we could get an independent, but then you know it's not sustainable. You try to negotiate, they orchestrate a coup d'etat and get you out and get another puppet in that will be able to continue their work, their bidding. So you see why France is the parasite? I mean, this is we just on the third, because the issue of coup, France started doing coup, orchestrated coup, getting rid of people. So any of the, the pattern continued, right? With, almost like all the French colony or former colonies that decide to, negotiate or talk against the colonial debt system, there will be a coup. If you say you can't pay it, there will be a coup. So people started noticing, so the leaders started giving into it. But before we get there, the number 4, right? Number 4, numbers don't lie, right? So you look at how these things happen. Let's break this down with the numbers. Over the last 50 years, right? Starting from when the independence, a total of 67 coups occur in African countries. 67, right? Out of those, 61% of them happening in Francophone Africa. So out of the total coup that happened, 61% of the coup happened in Francophone Africa. This reveals to the extent to which France was willing, right, to go, like I was saying in number 3, they were willing to undermine anyone who would try to, challenge a monopoly of power in the region. Pretty much they were just putting their puppets there in leadership. So the number of coups that happen in the Francophone country, we think, oh, these coups are happening now is a new thing. It's not. Coup has been happening, but it has always been in favor of maintaining this old order. These coups now, we are hoping that the coups that are happening now is in favor of maintaining a new global order, a new order that doesn't consist of France dominating and sucking the blood and soul of our people, right? So France, number 5. France's desperate grip on its colonies, right? France, pretty much what happened is, like President Jacques Chirac says, without Africa, France will slide down into a rank of a third world power. The truth is, France's financial well-being is heavily relies on this exploitation. So French former president is quoted saying that, French is desperate. Pretty much, it has to maintain this power grip on the African continent and all these ex-Francophone colonial former colonies so that France could be where they are today. Without relying on the resources and the money that is coming out of Africa to come into the French economy, France will become a third world country. That's from the French president saying that. That's not me saying it. So it goes to show why France is constantly in this predicament where they have to heavily rely on the so-called relation, Franco-Afrique, the relation between France and Africa. The Colonial Pact. Let's unveil some of the things that were in the Colonial Pact. Because this is really something that I want to, for you guys to see. There was 11 points that was made into this, Colonial Pact. 11 good points. Point number 1, colonial debts. African countries must pay for French-built infrastructures. 2, national reserves. African nations deposit their reserves in France's central banks. Natural resources right. France gets the first right to buy any discovered resources. So for instance, if a country discovers oil, diamond, or any other natural resources, France has the right. Can't sell it to anybody else but France. Can you imagine that? That's number 3. French company preference. So you cannot, let me read this. French firm take priority in government contracts. So if the government, African government wants to give contract to anybody else, they cannot give it to anybody else. If there's a French company that wants to have that contract, they will have to have the preference to get that contract. So pretty much the government, anyway, let me continue. Number 5, military training and equipment. It says France trains African military officers and supply their equipment. Can you imagine? Even your own military, you cannot, no different ally could do that for you. The French have to do it. And you see why right now when you see Mali, Burkina Faso going to the Wagner group in Russia, people are like, oh, but what? It's like, because they are breaking off from that Colonial Pact. When you call the United States in or any other country to come and train you, it's like you're breaking off from that Colonial Pact. You're breaking that. You know, we don't want to deal with France anymore, right? You go to the language imposition. French becomes the official language. So now, all these countries like Mali, Guinea, you see, you know, Mali is Mandingo dominant, or July, or, you know, but you're not gonna see them speaking those languages. Like they speak it, but the French language becomes the official language of the country, the business language of the country. They use a French colonial money, right? So Guinea, again, from the beginning of the story, Guinea was able to cut this one off. Number 8, the use of French colonial money. It said African countries are forced to use the French colonial currency. So when you look at these African countries, they call French CFA. They all have the CFA. Before they used to say French CFA, but I think they put the French away, they put CFA, but it's still being controlled by the French, right? So you see, you go to Ivory Coast, you go to Senegal, I think you go to all these other Francophone countries, most of them use the CFA, which is pretty much French money. The annual report, French require annual balance and reserve reports. So not only that you're reporting to your people, but you also have to report to the French about, you know, their resources, how you're managing, how the country's doing. So pretty much the country is not free, if you ask me. Number 10, military alliances. African country cannot enter into military alliance without French permission. That I can't even talk about it. I can't say, hey, what's the concept of sovereignty in this case? As a sovereign nation, you make your own decision to ally with whoever you want to ally with. But especially the military is really what dictates the sovereignty, because the military is there to protect the country from foreign invaders. And if you cannot make decisions as to who comes and train your military, who you work with, what is that? So anyway, number 11, war and crisis allies. France expect African country to support its interest in time of war or crisis. That is finished, like obligatory. You have to support us. If not, you get what you want. Pretty much, that's it. So those are like the French Colonial Pact, and these are things that were put into this agreement that African countries have to agree to. So when you look at these 11 points that I just read out, you notice that pretty much African countries ain't have their own sovereignty. You're just agreeing to be working for France. Okay, now let me get back to my number coming down. Number 7, the fight for freedom. This is where we are today. You know, it is a system that keeps African country in check, as I already said, right? Making them, you know, prioritize their own survival over the welfare of their people. The fear of coup and aggression has made many of the leaders hesitant to kind of fight against the French. If you actually listened and read through everything, you will notice that, the French really used coup to coup d'etat. They started with Sekou. They tried to get him out by all means necessary. It just didn't work. They tried to send coup d'etat, they tried to invade. No, Sekou was strong. It never worked. Try to poison him, they try to do everything, but it never worked. But all the other leaders who actually signed the contract and they refused to abide by some of the things that I just read, the French will manipulate. They will get into your system and find your friend or colleagues or other people who want to be in leadership, bring them closer, entice them with something. They will use them against you to kill you, and then they will take power. That's what the French has been doing. So these African leaders now couldn't fight for freedom. They are people. You don't know the reality, but it's hard for them to do it. Now, what is the way forward? Because obviously, many African leaders have been oppressed by the French. The president of the French, like I said, they are the parasites, the vampire. They're sucking everything out. And you see a vampire, if it's not in the day, at least the myth, if it's not in the day, you don't want to get out. So what's going on? What is the way forward? Number 8 and my final point. The way forward is very simple. Africa needs to break out of this bondage. And the way that they have to break out of this bondage is really by taking steps that would be in their own interests. All what I've read, all what I've discussed has been about the French. And when you have a parasite in your system, you take medication to kill that parasite, to get rid of it. And if you could cut it off, you cut it off. It is about time that African leaders really start sitting down and the people of Africa start sitting down and cutting the French off. Take that medication. It's a bitter medication. That's right now, that's why we see these coups happening in broad daylight. It's a medication that they have to take to cut the French off. It's not like the Africans don't want to have the democratical tendency is not in Africa. We love democracy, or at least we love the concept of representation, fair representation, and we love the concept of people being equal, people being able to express themselves and all that. But we cannot do those things if we cannot even maintain our own proper resources. It's impossible. Hence, it is time that African leaders step up, Africans step up and start cutting this parasite off, which is France. All the contract, everything that they have done with France needs to be renegotiated. Matter of fact, there should be no contract. We should work as independent countries who wants to work together. If you want to work with the Africans, you fix bilateral agreements, or you go through the African Union to negotiate with any other African countries. But it shouldn't be in the way that these things that I'm sharing, colonial debt. Why you should still be paying colonial debt? If anything, France should be paying African countries for the genocide and all the evil that they have done to these people to keep them suppressed. It shouldn't be the other way around. African countries should be able to choose who they want to work with. Whether they want to work with China, they want to work with Russia, it should be their free will. So, this buffer me, the way forward is really we have to step up. It has to be by power is not given, power is taken. Africans have to take the power back. The French has come and suppressed us for far too long. It is about time that we take the power. It's not given. There will be no negotiation until when we feel that we are equal, on an equal footing. Because that's how we will be able to negotiate. So right now, Africans, take the power from France. Take it by all means necessary. These coups they are what they are. They are, do the coups if that's the way that you could regain your sovereignty. Even the great United States doesn't want people meddling into their affairs. Why give French or any other country a right to go meddle into Africans' affairs? Hold them in bondage. We have to break this chain of of slavery. That's the only way forward. 14 African countries that are still under this colonial debt system, still under the Francophone heavy influence of France, the country, and the French people. And that needs to be breaking down. So ladies and gentlemen, the way forward is not easy, but people have to take it. You know, the new generation leaders are using coup to free themselves, as we have witnessed in Niger, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, just to name a few. But we need to do it now. Africa needs to stand up, and this is our best way forward. Thank you all for listening. As always, stay with me, Sekou staff. Your man Sekou Kesley here, signing off. Thank you and stay informed. Peace and love.